Hi, my name is Lona Muthania Uchido, and I'm making it one of my life's mission to demystify the speech therapy field and to empower more parents on what they can start to do in order to optimize their child's communication outcomes. So whether you want your child to talk more or talk better, learn better, and overall optimize their potential. So stay tuned and feel free to send in any topics on speech and language development you'd like for me to tackle. Welcome. So in today's My Opinion About series, I am tackling the topic of, does my child have autism? Wow. This question always stumps me. How do I respond? It's usually heavy. I'll do my best to answer this question blind, that is, without first evaluating your child. So I'll start by first defining what autism is. Autism, or autism spectrum disorder, is a developmental disorder that affects communication and behavior. So autism is referred to as a developmental disorder because symptoms generally appear in the first 2 years of your child's life. Your child could have developed the skills and then maybe start regressing, or it just starts to become apparent as they get older. Autism is referred to as a spectrum because there's a wide variation in the type and or severity of the symptoms that people experience. Autism has varying features or difficulties depending on whether your child is at the low end of the spectrum, so they are severe, or at the high end of the spectrum, mild. So they will, however, share certain features, whether or not they are high or low functioning. Autism is a lifelong developmental disability, which means there really isn't a cure, but you can manage it pretty well. Children with autism have social, communication, and language difficulties. They also have restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviors and interests, such as hand flapping, obsessive tendencies, echoing what others are saying, what we refer to as echolalia. So I say, "How are you?" and they say, "How are you?" instead of saying "fine." They might have excessive touching, excessive smelling. It varies. But socially, children with autism may display limited ability to play with others, to share toys, to maintain a common focus with a communication partner, and limited ability to understand feelings. So some of the language problems that children with autism may have include difficulty following instructions, understanding, using words, or difficulty learning how to read and write. But certainly not forever. So this is just at the beginning, with before intervention. So these children tend to share common behavior such as low tolerance for certain sounds, dislike for particular foods, limited or unusual interests such as spinning things, carrying items in hands as they go about their daily activities, difficulty changing from one activity to the other, and some may have limited eye contact. So often, eye contact seems to be the one feature that most parents, or that is most talked about, most parents use to assess whether their child has autism or not. And this can be very misleading. In Kenya, there is no standard procedure for diagnosing children with autism. Like literally, someone could take one look at your child and decide that they have autism. And this happens all the time. You're walking, you're going about your business, and the teacher says to you, "I think your child has autism." Like, what criteria are they using to decide that? I have encountered so many children who have come to my clinic having been diagnosed with autism by a teacher, a nurse, or sometimes even a doctor, and I couldn't see it. Like, really, I couldn't see the autism. You see, I have seen so many children present with traits that are autistic, or sometimes we call them tendencies, but these turn out not to actually be autism, It's usually more understimulation from my experience. In Kenya, at least, there is no consensus on the diagnostic procedure for diagnosing persons with autism. One of the widely accepted guide is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So you can Google that, DSM 5th edition. This was developed by the American Psychiatric Association. So it just looks at how many features your child presents with and then decides the severity. Are they low functioning or are they high functioning? Countries such as the United States of America, UK, Australia, New Zealand, etc. have had to agree on a way to diagnose persons with autism, as these countries usually offer support to families with children with autism to ease, access to services, etc. Therefore, it was important that they figured out an inclusion or an exclusion criteria, if you will, for allocating the resources they do for persons diagnosed with autism. So I worked in Australia for quite a number of years, and I can say in Australia, the diagnosis for autism for children is made by predominantly 3 professionals. So the pediatrician in consultation with the speech therapist and the psychologist. So what happens, both the speech therapist and the psychologist carry out their independent assessments after the pediatrician's initial assessment, and then they communicate these findings to the pediatrician, who ultimately makes the final diagnosis. In Kenya, though, this is definitely not the case. There is no set standard. You see, if someone saw your child after a long day or a long wait in the reception, or when they're hungry or tired, the child may act unusually, which may cause the examiner to see a severity of a worrisome trait and make the call. And this could be a premature call, yeah? So this child probably doesn't have autism, probably just was quite tired, quite agitated. What I say to parents though, more than the label, it is better, far better, to evaluate or document the symptoms or weaknesses in language or social skills that your child is presenting with, and target these in therapy. Besides, the label in itself has no relevance really. If the reason you are seeking a label is because your child is displaying delayed language skills, for example, or delayed speech and language skills, then whether someone gives your child a label or not, this is in Kenya, yeah? Your child will still require intervention, be it speech therapy, be it occupational therapy, be it educational support, you name it. So the label in itself does not make your child better. It really is just that, a label. I have parents who are desperate to know whether their child has autism or not. And fair enough, I understand this. And I tell them it really isn't important. Unlike in some Western countries where the label qualifies you for the service, and a label could mean the difference between your child receiving much needed, say, speech therapy and relief, you don't have to pay out of pocket, or whatever other intervention that your child requires. But in Kenya, the label is just that. And actually, it is even more stigmatizing in some cases. And you can even, just because you have a label, you might even experience that some schools deny your child admission, or they say they can't support your child just because they have that label. But the good news is, guys, children with autism do end up speaking and communicating and functioning quite well if the right intervention is given at the right time. I should know this, yeah? I know so many children with autism who we have worked with and who are communicating unimaginably well. Talking, having conversation, what's your name, and they answer you. So all that, I've seen it, if the intervention takes place early enough. So if you happen to suspect autism, or you have a child with delayed language skills at 2 years of age, or a little bit younger or older, it is best to consult with a speech language therapist and or a developmental pediatrician or pediatric neurologist. But also, it's good for you to note that you can actually seek an evaluation of the speech therapist without a referral. So you don't have to go and see a specialist before you are referred to us. Parents ought to act early, as early intervention holds the key to optimizing communication outcomes, not only for children with speech and language difficulties, but also those with autism. The common advice, I hear it time and time again, that is given to a lot of parents with children with delayed language skills, or those that are suspected to have autism or are showing tendencies, is give them time, give them time. This advice, though coming from very well-meaning friends and relatives and even professionals, it can rob a child of an early intervention opportunity that would significantly improve that child's outcomes. So another common advice given when a child is suspected to have autism, at least here in Kenya that I have heard, is to restrict a child's diet. Well, or the world over as well, which isn't always the solution either. and I'll explain why. So if you're interested in learning about the so-called autism diet, check out the rest of this series. And also please check out some of our other resources to learn more about any of the new topics this series has raised for you. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and catch you later. Thank you.